I'm your host, co-founder of Michael Gray's of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care, and we're glad you tuned in today. We have an exciting show. If you are looking on the internet, it's communitycop.org.
No, MNN.org.
MNN.org, and
Yes,
also you can tune in on Facebook at
Community Cop, Facebook on Community Cop.
Facebook on Community Cop. So welcome again, and let's go with our co-host. To my extreme right, Julian Harper.
Welcome, welcome.
And also we have to my immediate right, Father Lucas.
Hold up.
And another co-host who we should just say is a member, adjunct member, the great
OTEP.
the great attorney at war, Alton Maddox. And so let's get started now. We're gonna hit the street running. As you know, normally Noel is here, and he's on Community Cop business. So we hope that everything is okay, Brother Noel. Let's start all the way to my extreme right. This is Dr. King Day. What's your memories, Julian, of the great Dr. King?
Well, I mean, you know, there's so many great things that Dr. King has done. We can talk about all of the things he done in our community, for our community. But one of the things that stands out to me is his speech on Vietnam. You know, I think that that was a speech that really had white America look at him differently. And I think that the strength that he gave when he gave that speech, or the strength that he utilized when he gave that speech, was so awesome that that's what really was the pinnacle or the turning point on how he was viewed by white America. But I think that we need to make sure that that speech is heard more frequently, because I don't know if many of our youth have either heard that speech or see how it really coincides with what's going on today. So that's one of my specific memories.
Father Lucas?
He took it right from me, because while we're going to hear a whole lot about I Have a Dream, I think that speech, Why I Oppose the War in Vietnam, is totally relevant today as to why we should be opposing this military budget. The United States got its paws in so many countries around the world, dropping drone bombs and so forth and so on. And it took a lot of courage, because he knew not only white America was going to turn against him, but a whole lot of Negroes were going to turn against him, particularly among the clergy. And I would take that and add it to the letter from a Birmingham jail, which he wrote directly to clergy who were criticizing him for the courage that he did that it was going to interfere with the civil rights movement and all the rest of it. And he wrote this brilliant letter to clergy from Birmingham jail. So they go together.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing that brings the best to me is that Dr. King actually brought out the best in a lot of different people. And that was during a period when you not only thought about Dr. King, but you thought about a lot of other younger people, and you thought about a lot of older people. And I think that what Dr. King really did in bringing out the best in all of us is that you could really talk to Dr. King, and whether you agree with him or not, there could be a conversation. And sometimes he would change his positions, other times he may not. But his position always based on logic. And that became very important because many times you had people like Kwame Ture, who was very influential with Dr. King, because both of them were really philosophers, you know, and therefore they had that appreciation for what they really believed in, and they really, you know, stuck to their guns. But when they debated it, there were times when Dr. King realized that other people were right. I mean, there's a story behind his position on Vietnam, and you know, Kwame Ture and Cleve Sellers and others, you know, had a conversation with him and said, Doc, you know, you can't be non-violent home and violent abroad. That's just an inconsistency. And so you got to take a stance. And he did take a stance in Atlanta at his home church, in which Kwame Ture and Cleve Sellers were there in attendance. And that's where he first announced his position on the Vietnam War, and then obviously a year later he came to New York and announced it, and things got turned, and as a result of it, you know, we recall that. But I think more than anything else, he may have ducked it if other people had not been around him who said, "Doc, you know, this position is inconsistent. You need to look at it again," and they did, and there he was.
Well, certainly Dr. King was principled and upright and became one of the preeminent leaders in Black America during the Civil Rights Movement. And of course, it was the Montgomery bus boycott that brought him to national and as well as international attention. That lasted approximately 13 months. And he was so principled and upright when the opposition to the Montgomery bus boycott put out a lie that that the boycott was over. Dr. King and Dr. Abernathy, they went out 11 o'clock at night in Montgomery, hit all the bars, hit all the pool halls, you know, hit the clubs, and let everybody know in the course of 2 hours between 11 and 1 a.m. in the morning. That's how serious he was about his business, that they went out and went to all the clubs and let everybody know that the boycott was still on, so that by Sunday morning, that happened on a Saturday night, so by Sunday morning, all the preachers knew, as well as the parishioners who was hanging out that Saturday night, they all knew that the Montgomery bus boycott was still on. And we should always remember Vernon Johns, who set the plate for Dr. King, and we should all also remember Rosa Parks in that experience also. Any other thoughts about Dr. King?
No, I think that, you know, you essentially touched a lot of the bases.
And E.D. Nixon, by the way, we should always remember E.D. Nixon.
Right, and there was certainly a lot of players, you know, back then. And, you know, when you really talk about the Montgomery bus boycott, I think the one thing that people don't realize in discussing that is that it was not Brown versus Board of Education that brought about an end to Jim Crow. It was actually a case called Browder versus Garner, which actually rose out of the Montgomery bus boycott. And as a result of that particular case, the Supreme Court began to deal with the whole issue of segregation in terms of overturning Plessy versus Ferguson. But I think a lot of people really think that you know, that it was just simply a boycott, but there was a lot of legal consequences that came out of.
And the attorney was Gray?
Fred Gray was the attorney in that. And so I think that we don't really know the whole parameters, just like for a minute ago you said that there were certain people that we don't know about, E.D. Nixon, one of those, other people played a role in it. And I think the reason why we don't is because there really hasn't been a serious examination of the Montgomery bus boycott in terms of what we need to do today. Because certainly if there's ever a time when we have these problems, it's today. And a boycott is a real powerful tool, but it also is a tool that has to be well assembled. And I think that is a paradigm for us to pursue.
Well, it's interesting that we have not done that examination, because when one considers that in the Trayvon Martin case, our field marshal, Eric Josie, pointed out, he was down there, we sent him down there to Florida, and he pointed out that all the so-called national leaders, Jesse Jackson, Ben Jealous, Reverend Sharpton, they were all down there, and one thing they made clear to an overwhelming crowd is that there was not going to be any boycotts. So though those men claimed to come in the spirit of Dr. King, they did something against what made Dr. King who he was when they made it clear and reassured all the local business owners that there was not going to be a boycott.
Well, you know, the thing that was interesting, you know, just a moment ago, now you introducing it, which we were not really inclined to do, but I think that's really the thrust of this program, because the reality of it is, while there are a lot of things going on in a lot of other countries, but I think the criminal acts of Reverend Sharpton in particular should be particularly highlighted on this day, because if it's not this day, then when? And when you begin to think about what he has done to confuse people as to the role of Dr. King and what Dr. King really meant and the qualities that Dr. King have and that he doesn't have, you know. And so we got a new era of young people, and we're beginning to let them believe that there's a synonym between Sharpton and King, and there isn't, you know. And that's a real tragedy that I think has to be raised and has to be addressed.
Well, and of course, and anyone can jump in. Just on Dr. King, as I opened up by saying he's principled and upright, and I believe that at the point where he was assassinated, he only had a few $1,000s in the bank account for him and his family, and he had obviously young children and a young wife and a mortgage at that time. And when you consider now these civil rights leaders, the ones I just mentioned, are literally all millionaires. Which Noel normally points out, you know, these civil rights leaders that are now in the millionaire business. It just shows you the inconsistency.
I didn't want to let it pass also Dr. King's total dedication to the working class and to unions. And I could see him now with this blatant attack from Bloomberg, for example. Dr. King would be here. And I think it's rather ironic, too, that President Obama is going to be inaugurated at the same time of Dr. King's celebration, and any resemblance between the two of them is purely coincidental, except maybe pigmentation.
Now, Julian, what would Dr. King say about stop and frisk?
Well, I think he'd be
since
appalled.
It's unconstitutional.
Absolutely. So. I think he'd be appalled. I think that, as Alton Maddox stated, that he would be here standing with the rights of the denizens of this city as they're being violated by the New York City Police Department. As we spoke about last week, fortunately there is a federal court judge who put a stay on a portion of stop, question, and frisk. When I say a portion, I mean concerning the stops that are occurring in the Bronx and privately owned buildings. She said that it is totally unconstitutional, and that the police department in their arrogance violates the rights and the constitutional rights of the denizens of the Bronx. But to your point, Dr. King would absolutely and definitely be standing strong and forth with those.
Now I want to stay with you for a second on this, because as we well know, history showed us that it was the NYPD that launched a major attack that brought down Adam Clayton Powell. Now you saying that if Dr. King had saw what NYPD did to Adam Clayton Powell, he still would have challenged the NYPD?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And Brother Alton?
Yeah, well, you know, and you know, I had a very interesting conversation about a week ago with Sister Sybil Williams Clark,
the wife of
Dr. John Henry Clark.
Thank you.
And in that conversation, she was recounting some of the things that Dr. Clark has said over his lifetime. And one of the problems that we have now in our community is one of leadership, or being able to recognize who are leaders. And back then when Dr. King was there, you know, we had a lot of people that we really respected. Malcolm X, you know, Dr. King, Kwame Ture, a lot of people, you know, Fannie Lou Hamer, you know, came up. We don't really have that now, you know. But more important than that, she said that Dr. Clark said that there are two qualities that are really lacking in our community, and that they must be addressed before we get back on the right track. And those qualities were sacrifice and loyalty. And she said that leadership has to exemplify both those qualities. So, you know, when we go out here for the rest of this year and we start trying to identify who leaders are, you know, the two things that should come in our mind are who is sacrificing and who is really loyal. And, you know, are you sacrificing when you refuse to live with the community? You want to live down the east side? Or you sacrificing when you have to have millions of dollars to live large at the expense of the poor? You know, that's what that is about. And I think that we have a responsibility to refocus our community, to let them know what the past was, and let them know that we had people one time that really engaged in sacrifice, really engaged in loyalty to their race and to their people, and that those things are not here now, and that we have an opportunity to look among us and to see whether that exists. I mean, to see whether does that exist in Al Sharpton? Does that exist in Jesse Jackson? Does that exist in Ben Jealous?
Mark Mariel,
you know, and if they don't exist there, do we need to go start barking up another tree? You know, but we're obviously in the wrong location. So I think that's really critical to me. And that was what, I had the conversation with her, and I really wanted to share it, with other people as we're doing now, is that we really need to be able to go and be able to identify, who really is what. Because we always talk about racial profiling, for example, but there are certain qualities in racial profiling, that people look for. One is race in terms of blackness, other things, people on the street. And so when you look at leadership, we need to know whether this person is really a fraud or this the real thing. And I think that we have to have certain qualities that we look to in order to identify who we need to be following and who we should shun.
In addition to what Julian raised about Dr. King and stop and frisk being unconstitutional, I think there's another aspect I knew that would be driving him as a philosopher. It's also totally immoral because it is based on the degradation of human beings.
Right.
Absolutely. And but Dr. King respected that.
Yeah.
What we have now are people who don't.
Yeah.
Well, very quickly, when Alton Maddox talks about leadership, I think one of the things we really need to do is look at the leadership within ourselves. I think we need to look at what our goals are, what we are fighting, what we're combating, and what we have to do collectively to address the issues that are malaffecting our community. I always look at it like this. I think the masses of our people understand that there is a location, a goal that we need to get to. We all want to benefit African people. We all want to make sure that the goals that are needed to drive African people to a successful, comfortable, fair, and a way of life that's due to us, we all have that desire. We may have different avenues of getting there. You may go down 125th Street, you may go down 116, whatever it takes to get to the location we want to get to. Let's say if we all want to get to the state office building, we may have different ways of getting there. But as long as our goals, our true goals, are to get to that location, meaning the betterment for African people, then as long as we're driving to that place, then I think collectively we have to make sure that we have the same mind, the same mindset, and that we drive that force collectively.
I agree with everything you're saying, Julian. However, there are people that specialize in mind control. There are people that specialize in image. There are people that specialize in altering collective consciousness to a degree that, as Malcolm said, you can be hoodwinked, you can be bamboozled. You look at your enemy as your friend is your enemy. And certainly, and I agree with you when we say develop a concept of what leadership is, and develop that internally, and then from internally you can develop that externally, so you know what to look for. But do we look at someone who's constantly on TV? Is the leader the person who's on the radio? And is the leader reflecting our interests? Or is the leader reflecting their interests or what they perceive as applicable to white folks, their agenda, their palette, what's amenable to whites? And certainly we have leaders now, national leaders, who all financed, whether it's Urban League, whether it's Rainbow Coalition, whether it's National Action Network, whether it's the NAACP. They're all financed by white organizations, and white corporate America understands that if you prop up some people in front of black folks, we're going to follow them as leaders, because we don't have a criteria, even though Malcolm gave us a criteria, even though Adam Clayton Powell gave us specifically writ down a criteria on how you judge black organizations and black leadership. Unfortunately, we have not been astute. Dr. Clark taught us on what black leaders should look like, and unfortunately right now many of us are following 4 large organizations, 3 of them long history, 1 a very recent history, but he's eclipsed all the other ones. National Action Network with respect to just appearances, with respect to just repeating, showing that image on TV, that unfortunately is very hard for the average black person who has to do that 9 to 5, or in some cases 16 hours a day, and to get home and look to other people for leadership. So it's very difficult to do what you say, even though I think we should do that. Right. It's very difficult, and we've been bamboozled up to now, and there are people that are doing this as a hustle, not as a vocation in life, not as something that God has called them to do, something that they see as necessary. But this is something that's a hustle, you know, as they used to call them, poverty pimps.
You know, when you spoke about internal leadership, it brings me to the idea that I've been having for some time, that we should, instead of looking first of all or primarily for some outside leader, your first and primary leader should be whom you see when you look in the mirror.
And that was my initial statement. Right. You find leadership within. And then that's how we will develop the ability to drive towards the forces where we need to go.
Okay, because Dr. King, we're gonna, the whole show gonna be on Dr. King today. You know, this is King Day, and it's gonna be on Dr. King. So I would say to you, Alton Maddox, where would Dr. King be, philosophically speaking, with the gun laws and the whole situation with guns? And obviously, you know, both of y'all are Georgia born and bred. So obviously, there's a certain culture that you grow up in. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about Dr. King and the whole thing about gun laws.
Well, I think that when you consider the fact that Dr. King was a Georgia preacher,
right,
and you're talking about the culture of black preachers in the South, it's not surprising that when Bayard Rustin first met Dr. King, Dr. King was putting out his piece.
Right.
I mean, he was
That's
armed.
right.
He was,
That's right.
He was armed. All right.
Right.
So you know, I mean, that tells you to some extent, you know, what that culture is all about.
Right.
You know, the fact that, you know, most people in Georgia, I mean, even including myself.
Right.
You know, I had a gun when I was in Georgia. You know. And that's just a way of life. I mean, that's just the way it is, you know. And Dr. King was pretty much the same way. So I would say that a lot of things that he preached, you know, were basically tactics, you know, that he really. But I don't know whether he has been caught and pressed, you know, where he would say that for all reasons we should all turn our guns. I can't see that, you know. I can't see that happening in Georgia. I don't think he was raised on that way. I don't think that what he learned from Gandhi and others, you know, converted him to the extent that he would just be willing to dismiss the idea of guns. And I can tell you one thing, I mean, as a matter of fact, I would not be here today if it were not for guns. Because there were several times that I was lynched, nearly lynched, you know, and it took people with guns.
Right.
So I'll be hypocritical to sit here and advise anybody trying to lose their guns. I mean, because that's the way that you were raised, you know. So you have to be real about how you were raised.
Now, certainly, and I know that piece you're talking about when he was trying to dissuade Dr. King from Bayard Rustin from carrying a piece. Julian?
You know, I think there's a difference between totally disarming the nation as opposed to modifying some of the gun laws. When we start talking about automatic weapons, semi-automatic weapons, military-style weapons being in the hands of people who are not either mentally capable, don't need them for their everyday ongoings in life. You know, I mean, I think that we really have to modify how we look at the ownership of guns. You know, and I understand that people are very passionate about what happened in Connecticut. I mean, me personally, I'm very troubled by that as well. I'm troubled by any loss of life unnecessarily. But to think that someone needs to have immediate access to a 30 bullet magazine, 30 round magazine, to have AR-15s and all these other major high powerful arms, I don't think that's a need. I think that we do need some legislation, but I think we need total legislation. Don't just legislate the inner city. Don't just legislate the African American community. Don't just legislate the Hispanic community. Don't just legislate minorities. You know, when we talk about gun laws, I don't want it just to affect the inner city, because sometimes that's what happens. We need a collective legislation or to address these gun laws, because a gun that can be purchased in Arizona or Arkansas or Florida can make its way back into this city.
Right.
And as there's no need for those types of assault rifles and weapons in the city, there's no need for them in those areas either. So we need a real, some real legislation to address the proliferation of these weapons.
I think if you limit this to just gun laws, you're not going to get very far. You have to put it in the context of mental care or lack of it in this country. You have to put it in the context of this country has been born, reared, and continue to live in violence. Just check out your TV, your movies, and so forth. They get the most. You got to put it in the context of the United States bombing and shooting people all over the world, and folks are saying, "God bless America." That's all part of it, and you can't exclude. Now, when it comes to the aspect of gun laws, Julian is right. What I would add to it, however, is that there is no need for AR-15, M16s in the city at all, whether it's by civilians or whether it's by police. Those are military weapons made for war, and let them stay there. We see the militarization of the police departments all over, especially in the city. Police now using military weapons, or being able to get drones and all that kind. What's the good of an M16 in a subway or an airport? It's crazy. Right. So you got to put that all together and not just talk about, keeping it out of the hands of, it's got to be out of the hands of all those who do not need it.
Attorney Maddox?
Well, the thing that, I agree with everything that Father Lucas has said. The only thing that I would bring up is that we all cannot escape from our own personal experiences as well, and we become a part of those experiences. And I think the one of the things that happened, especially in the South, was is that you were dealing with the Klan. I grew up with the Klan, and so you dealt with people who immediately wanted to take matters into their own hands. A different experience in here because I haven't seen the Klan routinely walking the streets of New York as they, did in Georgia.
And it's safe to say that guns and the Klan are synonymous.
Yeah, okay, it's pretty much safe to say that. And the other thing that you have to also consider the fact that, and this Dr. Jones said, and I think you can extrapolate from what he said, and which is true, he said white people are rational on every subject except race.
Right.
and I think you got to consider that.
It's true.
As you move around, that when it gets to race, we talk about mental health. That may be a nice way of saying it. All right, it may be, it may be a nice way of saying something different. But as to why, this whole thing about mental health now, but they are completely irrational on the subject of race.
Very quickly, when you talk about mental health, and as I think about it, there's levels of mental health. When you start talking about sanity and insanity, you may talk from, there can be an insanity at a level 10 and insanity at a level 1. And I had an opportunity to view one of these late night media programs where there was a person discussing firearms, and he was so passionate about the need for him to be able to own these high capacity firearms, where he was borderline at that level 10, that insanity. So when you start talking about, someone can be sane on Monday and totally out of their mind on Tuesdays. So when you start talking about dealing with the mental capacity of people to own firearms, that's a whole nother subject. I concur that it has to be addressed, but if we can keep those major high capacity firearms out of the hands of out of everyone, then I think it'll be very difficult for someone who has that level 10 of insanity to get their hands on those kind of firearms.
Well, Julian, you just opened the can of worms, because I'd love to do a show on that level 1 to level 10 with respect to white people, and I would challenge you that they wouldn't consider level 10 crazy. But just want to get one more thing in, and if we come back to this, it's fine. But just want to talk about the mayoral race and get some ideas Attorney Maddox?
Well, I think that one of the things that we have to do, there are a lot of people that are running for office. Most of them are going to be in Harlem tonight, as has been advertised.
Right.
The question is, though, is that we have to do the procedure differently and in reverse order what they are talking about now. We need to, first of all, develop an agenda. The issues that are really a concern to our people, and then deal with what candidate can best advance that agenda. Now, the people that's up in Harlem tonight, they wouldn't come out to nowhere tomorrow night. I mean, and they wouldn't be the kind of people that more than likely going to advance our agenda. I think that what we need to do as a people, to begin to talk about what our agenda is. I mean, for example, President Obama said a few weeks ago, he said, I represent the middle class. Well, that means he doesn't represent us. All right, that's what that means. So, we need to, first of all, deal with what our own agenda is and then demand that somebody advance that agenda. And I think that's what we need to be doing the next few weeks.
Julian?
When you talk about the amount of people that are throwing their hats in this mayoral race, and it changes every day. I mean, I'm looking at 9 names off, on a sheet of paper that I wrote down earlier today, and I'm not going to name them. But, we have to look at what some of the agendas are of these particular people. I believe the Joseph, I believe his name is Lolita.
Yeah.
He was an aide to Giuliani. Right. He was also the head of the MTA. Now, you got to look at who these people are surrounding themselves with. He had a press conference and a meeting where he was talking to real estate owners, and developers, builders and developers. So these are the people that he's embracing and the people that he's going to look to benefit as mayor. These guys are in the business of benefiting themselves and benefiting big business and corporation. We really have to look at what these particular candidates are looking to do, what they're looking to do for the city and the people of the city. I mean, a lot of them are talking about things that may sound beneficial to the city, but if you look deep into who they are romancing during their time of politicizing or running for this particular seat, it is not to benefit the masses of people that reside in this city. And we have to really open our eyes and really hold these potential candidates accountable for what they're looking to do for the city.
Father Lucas?
Well, I think that what Julian just said is correct. The mayor right now, and I think certainly somebody that Giuliani would be pushing, looks as if he's trying to make, for example, Manhattan a gated community for rich white folks. They don't give a darn about us, about the working class or anything else. And as you have to look at these and not simply what they're saying when they come to Harlem or any place. Have to look at their backgrounds, what they represent, where they're coming from, and so forth. For a good example is look at the Supreme Court. Look at the background of these judges, and you have no difficulty understanding why Citizens United came up. Because these folks, most of them came right out of corporate America.
Okay, we have a lot of callers on the line. First caller, where you calling from? First caller. Are the callers online? First caller, where you calling from?
Hello?
Yes, where you calling from?
I'm calling from Harlem.
Question or comment?
Yes, last week you said you were going, I believe Brother Alton, and y'all said y'all were going to the NRA to speak about John White. Could y'all also speak about Trevor Dooley? He's a man who in 2 days is facing 30 years in prison because he stood his ground and committed act of self-defense against a white man in the same state of Florida that George Zimmerman did. And he's been treated differently from day one.
Well, the same situation that happened in Florida also happened in Georgia with the sister. It's happened across the board because we understand that the organization ALEC and other ones that develop these type of stand your ground laws, it is for white people, and certainly race is a factor in these laws. So certainly we can go through a litany of cases where blacks have stood their ground with respect to whites, and obviously the courts unfortunately look at those as different. They're not looking at it all as on a principle level. They're not colorblind when it comes to that, and certainly that's why with all that we do, the decision is the remedy is going to be in a courtroom, and that's why we need attorneys like Attorney Maddox in the courtroom. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Hi, I'm calling from Washington Heights, and I
question or comment?
Address the gun issue.
Yes.
The opportunity to drive an automobile in every state in this country is a privilege. The right to own a firearm is enshrined as a national right dating back to the Bill of Rights. I think that every individual, every citizen of the United States ought to be obligated to apply and receive training and be licensed to own a firearm. And then the individual would be left to choose whether to own one or not. The fact that the majority of our citizenry are licensed automobile operators.
Yes.
Gun owners ought to have licensed gun owners, and it ought to be taught. There ought to be a training process for whatever kind of gun you want to own. The federal right to own a gun is based on the protection of the population from tyranny. It's not necessarily initially about the protection of the individual.
Okay, brother, we got a lot of calls.
Therefore, the citizenry has an obligation to fulfill a federal.
We got your point. You know, we got your. Okay,
and
brother.
That's the way I feel about that.
Very good. We got your point. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Next caller, where you calling from?
Calling from Harlem.
Question or comment?
I got a comment. I just wanted to say thank you, brothers. How you doing, Big Mike?
Hey, brother. Oh, all right. Good, brother.
Okay, I just want to say I love your show. I'm just so confused. I mean, how can we get the fighting black spirit back? Because it seems like we as a collective people have just given up. They can do anything they want to us, and we just take it and sit there. How do we get that fighting spirit back that has been shown in Africa so many times? Thank you, brother.
I think we've been misled. Attorney Maddox?
You know, one of the things that happened today, I had to go down to Delaware State, because there's a black professor who's been dismissed, and Bo Biden, the vice president's son, is prosecuting him as well. And he wrote an article on ethnic cleansing in historically black universities and colleges. And as I was driving down there today, you know, there was a host of speeches by Dr. King that was on radio. And, you know, I got a chance to listen to a lot of them. And some, you know, you get refreshed as to not have heard it. And usually, you know, we only play these speeches now maybe once a year. You know, and so you have to dust off the recording and try to bring back your recollection. But, you know, one of the things that Dr. King said in one of these speeches is that every black man must sign his own Declaration of Emancipation Proclamation, and then move from there. There's an obligation for that, you know. And one of the great quotes of Dr. King was, "If you don't have anything to die for, you don't have anything to live for."
Right.
You know, and so that's how deep he saw manhood, and he was talking about how we have lost our manhood, and that we have to sign our own Emancipation Proclamation in order to bring that back. And I think that that's one of the real critical problems in our community. And I remember over 30-some years ago when I first came to New York, and we were out in front of the Schomburg protesting hiring of white archivists. And President Wilcox said, in response to a question about getting the support of the 100 black men in New York, he said, "Brother, there ain't 100 black men in New York."
Well, I think that's interesting, and just to go further with the caller, to get that spirit back is going to take a lot. Certainly, Frederick Douglass said it best when he talked about the slave master knows to what extent he can punish the slave and knows just how many times he can whip you and just how hard he can whip you, and will stop once he gets to that threshold, because he knows once you get to the point of no return, there's no turning back. That's why they have these so-called leaders they put in front of us, because they only add confusion and they misdirect things, and you just end up confused and you don't know how to channel your anger into something programmatic, into something logical, and take the right steps. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop.
Yes, I'm calling for Harlem.
Okay, question or comment?
Yes, I have a question. Have you guys ever attempted to invite Inspector Rodney Harrison from the 3-2 precinct on your show to call us from the Harlem community and question him on his directives and tactics and procedures when it comes to minority people? And two, I just would like to say I oppose any more restraints on gun laws when it comes to ammunition, because the reason why you have large clips is so you don't have to load as many times. Because we all know criminals do not care about a gun law, because they take the option to do whatever they choose to do when it comes to these guns, bringing them into the city. Again, in Mr. Alton Maddox, please tell us how can we protest some of these idiot politicians to see about getting you reinstated, sir. Thank you.
Well, let me just say to you that 100 Blacks in the Law Enforcement, we did have a meeting, a private meeting with Inspector Harrison, and there were a boatload of things we talked about, serious community issues, and I'll just say at that meeting that we walked away satisfied with respect to some of his answers. He gave some critical answers, and this was not at the behest of no one in our community. We just felt it was critical, seeing how we saw things going on in Harlem, to meet with him. So we had that meeting with him, and he said some things that that we thought was positive, and other things he just alerted us to where one police plaza's heading, where Commissioner Kelly, where he's heading at with things.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you have to understand that these commanding officers work at the behest of Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly. The orders come from the top, as old Mags always says. You know, if the head stinks, you know, and the bottom line is the head stinks when it comes to the NYPD, and you're talking about Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Hello.
Yes, where you calling from?
I'm calling from Harlem. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because your voice,
question or
I
comment?
can barely hear you on my end.
Gotcha.
But anyway, Brother Harper, you made an excellent point earlier when you were talking about the levels of sanity. I was watching the program on the military channel, and they were talking about these new guns for the 21st century. And if you could just observe the way that these white men were talking about these weapons, I mean, the look in their eyes, they were so passionate about these new weapons. I mean, you would think that a black man was talking about the woman he loves, the way that they were describing these weapons. They look shining and new, but does anybody talk about the carnage that these weapons cause when bullets rip through human flesh? Nobody wants to deal with that. And a caller prior to me made an excellent point. Criminals don't care about gun laws. You know, I'm not a gun enthusiast, and I don't really advocate that everybody go out and get a gun. But at the same time, we have to realize that gun laws only affect people who try to obtain them legally. I mean, I couldn't even order a BB gun, you know. So, I mean, I think that it's necessary that, yeah, unfortunately, people do need guns. When you live in a society where you have so much lawlessness, you certainly can't depend on the NYPD to protect you. And in some cases, you need protection from the NYPD. If Amadou Diallo had a gun, maybe he'd still be alive. I'll call you guys next week to give you my opinion on Al Sharpton. You brothers, take care. Have a good day.
Yes, sir. We thank you for your insight. You know, I'll just say that no, we'll just next caller. Welcome to Community Cop. I was just going to say for the record
good
that.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go.
Okay, I'm calling.
Where you calling from?
New York.
Where?
Harvard in the Rockaway.
Okay, good.
Okay,
All right.
welcome to the, gentlemen, welcome to the year 2013. Brother Alton Maddox, on behalf of my niece, Keisha, me and the family loves you.
Thank you very much.
To the brother who called and asked about strong black men, tell him, you know, white America got us going into foreign countries to kill and die for them. That's why we don't see many of us here today, because we in foreign countries for we have white people killing other people. Also, leadership. I think of Rosa Parks, Dr. King, and the black men of slave time who petitioned Abraham Lincoln to join the war, the Civil War, so they become free slave men, that we become free today. And somehow along the way, this leadership and this boycott leadership, somebody had thrown a monkey wrench in the mix of us, to where we just walk down the streets, go home and cry, walk down the streets, go home and cry, we do nothing. We got to get back to making things change. I just wonder, how can we do that? How can we look at ourselves in the mirror and say, this has got to be not what they want us to be?
Well, thank you, brother. And just wanted to point out that Dr. King was at a crossroads when he, as Julian pointed out earlier, he had to make the decision when leadership surrounded him and told him that it's inconsistent to continue pushing a nonviolent platform, and yet violence is going on in Vietnam exponentially, and to a level where it's just inconsistent not to speak out on it. The Black Baptists threw him out of the convention. He was pushed away by black leaders who said that President Johnson was a good man and that he was pro-civil rights, and they were at odds with him because of the stance he took. But Dr. King took a principled stand. That's leadership. You know, when you don't even stand with other so-called black leaders, when you have the courage to disagree because a principal issue is in front of you, you got to go with the principles, not the corporations. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop.
Yes, hello. Good evening. How are you?
Good, brother.
Okay, this is Omar calling from the village of Harlem. I hope you can hear me.
We hear you.
My point is, well, first of all, I want to wish Dr. King, not only Dr. King, a happy birthday, but then, of course, we can't forget one of my favorite heroes, Muhammad Ali. He'll be celebrating his birthday on the 17th.
That's
He'll be
right.
72 years young, along with, of course, one of his main opponents who was born on the same day, Joe Frazier.
Joe Frazier, that's
so,
correct.
Joe, I know you up there in heaven fighting the battles for us, too. But you know what, I wanted to talk about something that's affecting the community is the so-called minimum wage. I just heard Governor Cuomo say that he thought the minimum wage should be $8.45, whereas people out in California are making $10, $10.15. I'd like to know, maybe you can digest what I'm trying to say, but how could someone in the year 2013 in the Christian calendar raise a family on $8.45 an hour? I think that's downright disgraceful. And as far as the guns are concerned, you have more guns here in America. You have about 315 million people. You have more guns than that. And the brother who's talking about the strong black men, Father Lucas, you should tell him, go out to Rikers Island. When we try to stand up and say something, they put the cuffs on us. They know it. You go into any precinct and you find strong black leadership. And the brothers on the panel, I wish one of you guys, one of you brothers would run for the mayorship. I'm sure you would give whoever they put up against you a strong run for their money. Once again, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Keep the faith, brother.
Love you too,
brother.
I just want to point out that even $10.50 an hour is in New York City. You raise a family of 4, try it.
None of the mayoral candidates reflect our interests. We know who the 4 ones that are going to appear tonight, and certainly the governor himself does not reflect our interests, and that's why they say the things that they say, and that's why they do the things that they do, because they don't reflect us.
And I just want to say, Omar, I love you, and nothing you can do about it. But more important than that, you brought up something but very important to me. 2 days from now not only will we be celebrating Muhammad Ali's birthday and Joe Frazier, but we'll also be celebrating my father's, who's also up there with Joe Frazier. So that's a very important
Who
day.
I got to meet at Dr. Jones' church.
Right.
At least I got to meet him.
And that's a very important day for me as well. So when he brought that up,
Next caller, welcome. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Yes. Hello, man. I want to say in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Where you calling from?
I think we have outlived the Second Amendment. I know I might be saying heresy, but with the police department that we got, with the army that we got, why do we need these guns? In England, they don't have these guns. In France and Germany, all through Europe, you never hear about these kind of incidents because they've extracted guns out of their society. So if you take the guns away, nobody can do this kind of stuff. The only hunting gets done is at the A&P, basically. You don't need, nobody's living off of their rifles to eat. So with a well-regulated army, we don't need these guns anymore.
Well, that's a good point, but I'll just say that the only community I know that they're asking to take away guns from is the black community. They just did a buyback in Los Angeles and came up with somewhere around 2,500 weapons, and they obviously they're doing it here in New York. And every time I look around the country, these so-called urban buybacks are primarily in the black community. I'll tell you that much. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Where you calling from? Next caller, you on the air.
Hello?
Yes, where you calling from?
I'm calling from Harlem.
Okay, question or comment?
Yeah, this is basically a question and a comment aimed toward Brother Maddox. At 6 o'clock every day for like 5 days on MSNBC, I've been watching this guy Sharpton and whatnot, and I know like at one time or another y'all had a partnership of some kind, and I understand like.
Get right to your question, brother. We're running out of time.
Oh, all right. Now like I noticed this cat is a name dropper. You know what I'm saying? He's basically I can't imagine this cat even being termed as a black leader. And as sharp as you are, why didn't you see this when you was like right up there with him?
Attorney Maddox?
I could see it on his TV show.
Okay, got your question, brother. Attorney Maddox.
Well, I think that that's a point, but it's a misleading point because there's a lot more dynamics going on in the black community than Al Sharpton. And the one thing that I raised, and I think Michael was there, this was back in June 1987, when there was a meeting of about 100 black leaders at House of the Lord Church. And I said something then that I still stick to now. And that is, obviously, there were a lot of people who knew that Sharpton was a snitch. Louis Clayton Jones never necessarily called him a snitch, but he called him a crook. And I had a lot of respect for Clayton, even though Clayton had no animosity for Sharpton. But the point that I raised then, and the point that I still raise now, is this. When there are people in our community who are betraying us, we don't need to have to wait for white people to tell us to get them. We need to be able to do that ourselves. And as Michael knew back then, there were people who wanted to get Sharpton, but they only wanted to get him because white people said it. And that doesn't really clear the slate. We see somebody doing wrong, we need to have enough character in our own community to be able to take care of those problems and not have to wait for white people to tell us that we need to get Sharpton there. For example, back then, there were a lot of people who said, well, we need to get Sharpton, but the reality of it was Jack Newfield who felt as though that Sharpton could help knock off Don King. And so as a result of that, you had that problem. So, I think you need to look a little bit deeper than this. Maybe if you call back next week when we have a little bit more time, I can be a lot more explanatory, but it's a lot deeper than what you think. But the bottom line is we need to start taking care of our own and stop waiting for orders from downtown before we assassinate somebody.
Closing comments, Julian?
We have a major mayoral election coming up. I think we have to stop sitting by idle and let them decide what they want to put before us. We really need to be strong and attack this political structure and make sure that we get the people to run for office, or that we vote for the people that's going to help benefit our community. Dad, I love you. Reinstate Alton Maddox.
Attorney Maddox.
And I want to say, repeat what Julian said. And I just want to add to that by saying that this is a critical year for us, and that we're the largest voting bloc in this city. And there's no reason why we can't put our own in City Hall without a black agenda to take him to the finish line.
Father Lucas?
I'm glad that you said that. And when you say our own, it's not what the party may look like, as whether the party is going to be fulfilling our agenda.
Absolutely.
Those who believe in prayer, let's pray for Brother Elambe Brad for a full recovery. Reinstate Alton Maddox. Thanks to Veronica Kitt, Nat Woods, all those in the staff in the control room that make us look good and help us with the program. All of our texts. Sheila Berry. Just get well, Sheila, by the way. We love you so much and we praying for you. And Father Lucas is coming to see you real soon, and we are too. In any event, everybody out there, UAM tomorrow night, Wednesday night, 1068 Fulton Street in Brooklyn, 7 o'clock. So, and thank you so much for watching Community Cap. See you next week.
By the way, Saturday
to pay the bill, and while we still have the chance, let's face the music and dance. Soon we'll be without the moon, humming a different tune.